This is Qatar, a tiny desert peninsula on the Persian Gulf measuring just 11,571 square kilometers. That is smaller than Connecticut. It has almost no rivers, no major forests, very little arable land, summer heat regularly above 50 degrees Celsius. But Qatar is among the richest nations in the world. In 2026, Qatar's GDP per capita is projected to stand at approximately $76,500 in nominal terms, and around $122,000 when adjusted for purchasing power. That's higher than the advanced economies such as the United States, Norway, Switzerland, the United Arab Emirates, and even neighboring Saudi Arabia. But here's what makes Qatar extraordinary. Only about 15% of the population are native Qatari citizens, with the remaining 85% being expatriates. So how did a small desert nation transform from a pearl diving economy into one of the wealthiest places on Earth? Here is a map. This shows where Qatar extracts its natural gas. The North Field, the Al Khalaj gas field, the Dukhan oil field. There are dozens of extraction sites across this tiny nation. Before oil was discovered in 1939, the economy was based on pearl diving. Qatar became a British protectorate in 1916 and gained independence in 1971. Qatar sits on the North Field, the largest natural gas reservoir on Earth, shared with Iran. Oil and gas account for more than 70% of total government revenue, more than 60% of GDP, and roughly 85% of exports. But many countries have gas: Russia, Iran, the United States, Norway. What makes Qatar different? First, population. Qatar has only 3.1 million people total, and only 15% are citizens. When you divide massive energy revenue by a tiny citizen population, the wealth per person becomes staggering. Compare this to Nigeria, which has oil and gas, but also 230 million people. Or Saudi Arabia, with 36 million people versus Qatar's 450,000 citizens. Second, timing. Qatar invested heavily in liquefied natural gas infrastructure when other countries hesitated. The North Field projects are set to lift LNG capacity from 77 million tons per year in 2024 to approximately 126 million tons per year by 2027 and 142 million tons per year by 2030. Third, global investment. Qatar created the Qatar Investment Authority, one of the world's most powerful sovereign wealth funds, managing hundreds of billions of dollars in global assets. London real estate, American corporations, Asian infrastructure, European banks. This means Qatar is not just an energy exporter, it is a global investor. Compare this to Venezuela, which squandered its oil wealth through corruption and mismanagement. Qatar built institutions instead. Imagine you are standing at Hamad International Airport. You want to reach Doha city center, approximately 19 kilometers away. It takes 20 to 22 minutes on public transport. The same distance in Mumbai? Hours. In Jakarta? Hours. Qatar built infrastructure that actually works. The 2022 FIFA World Cup cost over $220 billion. Critics called it wasteful, but it transformed Qatar's global identity. Before the World Cup, most people could not point to Qatar on a map. After, the world saw Doha's metro system, highways, stadiums, and airports. Policy is guided by Qatar National Vision 2030 and the Third National Development Strategy, which push private sector growth, human capital, and non-oil services. Compare this to Brazil, which hosted the 2014 World Cup and 2016 Olympics, but saw infrastructure projects abandoned and stadiums turned into parking lots. Qatar still using every facility. In the early 2000s, many economists predicted that relying on gas and oil made Qatar too risky. Oil dependency was supposed to lead to economic stagnation, just like the famous resource curse seen in Venezuela or Nigeria. But Qatar avoided that trap. Unlike Venezuela, where mismanagement led to hyperinflation and collapse, Qatar used its gas revenue to build institutions instead of merely spending it. Qatar invested in education. The country has a literacy rate of about 97%. It built Education City, hosting branches of Georgetown, Northwestern, and Carnegie Mellon universities. It invested in healthcare. Aspetar Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Hospital treats elite athletes globally. Footballers like Neymar, Lucas Hernandez, and Goncalo Ramos have received treatment there. It invested in aviation. Qatar Airways became a global leader, connecting over 170 destinations. Hamad International Airport consistently ranks among the world's best. Compare this to Saudi Arabia, which is only now attempting similar diversification through Vision 2030. Qatar started decades earlier. But Qatar faces a critical challenge. Despite efforts to promote non-hydrocarbon sectors and diversify the economy, the oil and gas sector has consistently contributed to at least 80% of government revenues since 2014. In late 2026, Israel and the United States launched attacks on Iran, escalating tensions across the Middle East. Iran responded by targeting American military bases in the region. Here on the map, you can see the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow but critical waterway. This is Qatar, and here is Iran. Iran threatens to block the strait and even attack container ships passing through it. If that happens, Qatar has no easy alternative route to export its oil and gas to international markets. Since much of its GDP depends on energy exports, such incidents could push Qatar to diversify its economy faster. At the same time, the world is moving toward clean energy like solar, wind, and electric vehicles. China, one of the world's largest energy consumers, is rapidly expanding renewables. China now leads the world in solar and wind capacity, with renewables making up around 30% of its electricity generation, and it sells millions of electric vehicles each year. This global shift shows that energy-dependent nations may need to adapt to a cleaner, more diversified future. Look at this map. Here's the UAE to Qatar's northwest, and here is Saudi Arabia to the west and south. Both the UAE and Saudi Arabia are oil-rich countries. Dubai already diversified. Tourism and real estate now dominate its economy, with oil accounting for less than 1% of GDP. Saudi Arabia is spending trillions on the Line and Vision 2030 projects, desperately trying to reduce oil dependency before it's too late. Qatar, still 80% dependent on gas revenue. Qatar proves that wealth is not about size or population. It is about strategy, timing, and institution building. A peninsula smaller than Connecticut became one of the richest places on Earth by combining massive natural gas reserves, tiny citizen population, strategic global investment, and infrastructure that actually functions. Compare Qatar to Argentina, 240 times larger in land area, yet Argentina's GDP per capita is only $12,667 versus Qatar's $76,500. Size does not determine wealth, strategy does. So here's my question. Can Qatar maintain this wealth post-oil? Or will it follow the path of nations like Nauru, which went from riches to ruin when resources ran out? Drop your perspective below.